Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Game Telecom video we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. We're going to be starting things out with AMD because the company gave further information regarding Spectre, along with details on if they're affected on their GPU side of things with these recent bugs/exploits, and Lisa Su has also doubled down on the company's commitment to privacy. Then we'll discuss a more amusing issue, specifically Meltdown on the Xbox 360, or at least a variant of it, of a long-standing bug inside the CPU architecture of Microsoft's Xbox 360. And then we'll finish the video with comments from Nvidia's CEO Jensen Huang. This covers everything from the self-driving cars, artificial intelligence, HPC, down to big format gaming displays. So we'll discuss some of those facets of an interview. But we'll start things out with a press statement from Mark Papermaster over, once again, at AMD. He serves as the company's Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer. I'm a couple of days late to this, to be honest. It was released Friday, but it was quite late my time, and Saturday, as some of you may be aware if you follow us on Facebook. Amy, myself, plus several friends were in London, well, doing London things. Pretty much that means going to Forbidden Planet, which if you're not a Londoner or you're not into it, that means comic shops, that type of jazz. And we also went to a restaurant as well. This is not a plug because my friends don't own the restaurant or anything like that, but we went to a restaurant by the name of Taro's in London, which is a Japanese kind of place. It's not bad prices actually, and it was really good. So it was pretty much just a day out. So yesterday's videos were a bit behind. But anyway, on with the show, or something or another, I don't know. Anyway, so Mark Papermaster, as I said, did release a press statement. He went on to say that the Project Zero Variant 1 of Spectre is applicable to AMD processors, but they believe that the threat can be mitigated with operating system patches and already working with OS providers to address the issue. You might recall there was news, and I did cover this very briefly actually, I should have probably given it more coverage to be fair, that some older AMD processors, namely Opteron, Athlon and Turion X2s, basically had this small problem when you applied the patch. By a small problem I mean your system didn't boot. But anyway, according to Mark Papermaster, they are resolving this issue and they believe that the updates should resume by some point next week, which means in a couple of days' time. And obviously keep an eye on Microsoft's website. Linux are already rolling out the patches for Variant 2, which is Branch Target Injection, that is also known as Spectre, of course. Both of those variants are Spectre, both Variant 1 and Variant 2. It is applicable to AMD processors. We already knew that, but they have once again confirmed that they don't believe it's that much of an issue with AMD CPUs. They are going to be releasing microcode update and OS patches. And furthermore, there will be optional microcode updates for customers and partners for both Ryzen and Epic, and that's going to start next week. As for older products, so for example, if you've got an FX 8350, well, by golly, don't worry, my good friend, because you will also be getting updates. Now, of course, if you've got some motherboard and, you know, maybe a really old version of an operating system, then you might have to wait, or it might be a little more difficult to update. But generally speaking, if you've got a fairly well supported motherboard, a fairly well supported operating system, when it comes to AMD, especially on the more modern CPUs, you've got absolutely nothing to worry about, at least for now. I would like to know a little bit more details, but I'm guessing they're still trying to figure this stuff out. As for Variant 3, which once again is Meltdown, it is not applicable to AMD processors. That is a rogue data cache load, and once again, they believe that this has got to do with the use of privilege level protections within paging, and thus they don't need to mitigate. In other words, their architecture is safe. So nothing different there, they've just confirmed it. As for the Radeon GPUs, and this is definitely new, there is not speculative execution, and thus those are not susceptible either. We'll talk about Nvidia and whether their GPUs are susceptible. Hint, no. But we'll go into that because Jensen was actually not happy about a couple of people saying that Nvidia's were. We'll get into that in a second. And obviously AMD will continue to collaborate and mitigate any security issues. Lisa Su decided to weigh in on this. And to be honest, if you're expecting something new from her, well, I've got bad news for you. She essentially just echoed the statements. To clarify, this, by the way, was told to Yahoo Finance, not Finance Yahoo. That would probably make more sense, wouldn't it? To clarify, for Meltdown, AMD is not susceptible. We don't have any susceptibility to that variant, but with Spectre, AMD is susceptible. And then said we already have some microcode updates and software updates to ensure that variant 2 is taken care of, and we want to make sure these patches out rolled out as smoothly as possible. We did have an issue with some older processors with Microsoft and their patch. We're working on this in real time, and we expect things to be cleared up quickly. Obviously, her comments, and this is the primary reason I'm bringing this up, her comments are to smooth things over because obviously Yahoo Finance is typically read by a lot of folks who do stock market investment, and we all know that Intel stocks got absolutely hammered. They went down about 7-8% if memory serves. Don't quote me on that exact statistic, but let's just say that Intel probably were not camping merrily. Meanwhile, AMD stocks went up a little bit, then they kind of went down a little bit. I'm guessing, I haven't kept exactly a careful eye on this. I'm only kind of doing a quick refresh here and there because obviously covering news, but I'm going to make the assumption that this is due to profit taking. In other words, people bought AMD when it was like 11.50 or whatever it was trading at. It went up to like 12, whatever it was. I'm just going to call it 12.50. I don't have the numbers on me. I think they're around 12.40, 12.50. They went up to, don't quote me exactly. And then obviously people just said, okay, well now we're going to take the profits, and Intel somewhat recovered as well. So that's definitely worth noting. The other thing, of course, that did smack AMD stocks somewhat is when they found out that some of the older CPUs were freezing up and unstable once the patch hit. So that definitely was somewhat AMD's bad, so that went down about 4%. Once again, I'm getting these statistics and figures off of Yahoo Finance, which, as I just mentioned, will be linked, of course, along with all this other stuff in the description of this very video. Aren't I just wonderful to you all? Now on a lighter note when it comes to CPU side of things, and I'll also, of course, link this in the video description. This is more an amusing piece of news. If folks do want me to do a more in-depth analysis, I might do, but it is an Xbox 360 at the end of the day, so I don't necessarily think everyone's going to be super concerned about it. But anyway, it is, if nothing else, rather amusing. So Bruce Dawson used to work for Microsoft. Now he's currently over at Google, but he was one of the key leaders of the Xbox 360's CPU, and he actually released a blog post where he reminisces about an issue while working on the Xbox 360's CPU. Now, it is a fairly lengthy post, and honestly, it's going to take me a lot of video if I were to cover it in depth, so that's why I'm going to somewhat glaze over it for a news piece rather than a technical analysis, but I will read a few pertinent sections. Now, he starts off by saying that back in 2005, I'm going to read this obviously verbatim, I was the Xbox 360 CPU guy. I lived and breathed that chip. I still have a 30cm CPU wafer on my wall and a 4-foot poster of the CPU layout. I spent so much time understanding how that CPU's pipelines work that I was asked to investigate some impossible crashes. I was able to intuit how a design bug must be their cause. But first, some background. So I'll quickly go over this because it is worth laying down the foundations, as you probably are aware. The Xbox 360 CPU is a 3-core PowerPC CPU made by IBM. The 3 cores sit on 3 separate quadrants, with the 4th quadrant containing a 1 megabyte level 2 cache. So you can see that there are different components in the picture on my CPU wafer. Each core has 32 kilobytes of instruction and a 32 kilobytes of data cache. Oh, and I'm going to throw in this piece of trivia as well, just in case you want to know it. Core 0 was actually closer physically in proximity, just to clarify, to the level 2 cache, and therefore Core 0 actually had lower latencies when it was accessing data that was residing in level 2 cache. According to Bruce, there were a couple of issues with the 360's CPU. The first is it had high latencies, obviously not exactly the best thing. And on top of that, it also had high latencies for main system memory. So not only was the level 2 cache quite slow, and the rest of the CPU cache is quite slow, but actually accessing the memory in the system, which of course was GDDR3, was not exactly great. So one of the things you'll need to do when developing for a game, according to him, was conserving space and level 2 caches. I have a feeling that some of you who perhaps worked on Xbox 360 games are maybe having flashbacks right now. And it's okay, you can pause the video and, you know, breathe for a moment. But the Xbox 360's CPU is an in-order processor. We've discussed that in length before. You can actually search for that on the channel if you desire. But it basically does what it says on the tin. It will read and follow and execute instructions in a specific order. But it does have a branch predictor. So, of course, the reason behind that is that the CPU does have quite long pipelines. So now that I've laid the groundwork, I'm going to read out a couple of the main parts of this story of woe. So the branch predictor, God, I can't speak today suddenly, makes a prediction, and the predicted instruction are fetched, decoded and executed, but not retired until the prediction is known to be correct. Sound familiar? The realization I had, and it was new to me at the time, was that it meant that speculative execute a prefetch latencies were long, so it was important to get the prefetch transaction on the bus as soon as possible. And once a prefetch had been initiated, there was no way to cancel it. So a speculatively executed XDCBT was identical to a real XCBT. This is speculatively executed load instruction was just a prefetch. If you don't know what that stuff means, you can basically look at it that the CPU would grab a instruction, it would decode that instruction, it would then execute the instruction. We've actually gone through how a CPU functions. You can search for that on the channel. I think it's called How CPUs Work or something along those lines. You can search for it. So a CPU goes through multiple pipeline stages. It will fetch an instruction, decode an instruction, which is basically what do I do with this instruction. It will execute that instruction. So for example, if an instruction is what is 1 plus 1, it will fetch that instruction, which will be of course the 1 plus 1. It will then decode that instruction, which is okay, what do I do with this instruction? And it will execute that instruction. It will send that data to the specific parts of the processor which will be able to handle that instruction, and then Bob's your uncle. But because it is a prediction, it is not necessarily saying that it is 100% correct, it is a guess. Well, it can't remove the data, because if it removes the data, then it has to grab that data once again from a lengthy series of events. So what it will then do is keep the data into the system for now. So he goes on to say that the branch predictor would sometimes cause XDCBT instructions to be speculatively executed, and it was really as bad as executing them. One of my co-workers, Frank Tracy, suggested a clever test to verify this: replace every XDCBT in the game with a breakpoint, and it achieved a couple of things. The breakpoints were not hit, thus proving the game was not executing XDCBT instructions, and the crashes went away. So, if you've been following along with this and your brain is starting to melt through your nose, what this basically means is it's essentially like Meltdown. The thing about Meltdown is that it doesn't necessarily mean that a processor is literally executed, as in it is a speculative execution, and that still was enough to cause the crash. So once again, according to him, verbatim, the branch predictor realization made it clear that this instruction was too dangerous to have anywhere near in the code of segment of any game. Controlling when an instruction might be speculatively executed is too difficult. The branch predictor is indirect branches could theoretically predict any address, so there was no safe way to put an XDCBT instruction. And if speculatively executed, it would happily do an extended prefetch of whatever memory segment registers happen to be randomly contained. It was possible to reduce the risk, but not eliminated, and it would not be worth it. While Xbox 360 architecture discussions continue to mention the instruction, I doubt that any games ever shipped with it. So in short, if this did actually execute in real code, there was a possibility, or rather if this instruction was used in real code, there was a possibility, just by happenstance, that oops caused the crash and your system would log up. And according to him, he was actually asked during an interview, what's the toughest bug that you've ever had to investigate? In other words, a job interview. And he was said, well, we did have to do this thing, and obviously he described this situation. And the interviewer, according to this, was, yeah, we hit something similar on an alpha processor. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that. And once again, I've gone into some of those details before on how a CPU's pipeline works and all of the other bits and pieces. Oh, and because I'm a wonderful man, not really, I just quickly searched, you can check out a video on our channel, which is How a CPU Works, a basic guide to processor stages and functionality. And there's also a much older video, so you'll have to excuse lower production quality. But there was a video uploaded about 4 years ago, and it is PlayStation 3 Post-Mortem Part 1. I've never actually continued that. I might do so. Maybe I'll remake the video, I'm not sure yet. But anyway, it's how the PlayStation 3's cell processor works and how it differs to the Xbox 360's if you so desire. But we're going to finish this video off, of course, with Jensen Huang. Now, this is, once again, a part of a very lengthy interview, so I won't go into all the details because I'll be here for way too long, but I will go through the pertinent parts. This is a part of an interview from VentureBeat. You guessed it, it will be linked in the description of this video. So, regarding big format game displays, he essentially said, unsurprisingly, that reception was very good. What can we do to expand the reach of gaming and take the experience to a whole new level? We always thought it'd be great if we could take a PC gaming, which is already amazing, and put it on one display that we wished it to be on, the largest display in the house. What would you call the largest display in the house? It's the BFG display. That's why we called it the BFGD, the big format gaming display. That's what it stands for, and it never gets old. To be honest with you, I always think of it as the big... You know what I'm going for with Doom. Anyway, BFGD is G-Sync 120Hz, so there's literally no stutter. If you're running at 120Hz, there's no stutter. Of course, you just can't feel it. If there's any change in the frame rate, G-Sync kicks in, and there's no stutter. It's just smooth, low latency, high dynamic range, huge format. I can't imagine a better way to game. The response from reviewers and gamers has been completely over the top. People just love it. You're engulfed in this virtual world. Life is good. End quote. Of course, the price is also not great because it's going to be very expensive, as you can imagine, at least for now. And the screens that have been revealed are 65 inches, which is pretty damn humongous. And it does, I have to say, look rather spiffy. But I will say, to run at 120 Hz for a game that, let's say, is like The Witcher 3, well, you're probably going to sell a couple of your kidneys to power that thing. Or better still, find someone else's kidneys and sell those. I'm not giving you advice. Consult, a lawyer on that one. Now another question, or rather an answer. This is regarding his comments that CPUs are not that great for AI, and the GPUs are much better, more naturally good at it. But it seems like the latest design, that's 9 billion transistor chip, last year's was 15 billion, you're almost getting away from the GPUs to get a ground up AI. Huang said, the initial proposition that CPUs aren't good at AI, and I'm not going to disagree with that. I would agree that CPUs aren't good for any highly parallel computing work. We did a lot of AI work on our GPUs, and now, in this new SoC, they're of course referring to Xavier, we actually have a specific accelerator dedicated to deep learning. Out of our Xavier, there are 30 trillion operations per second, which are basically 4 Pascal chips. It's a combination of 16 floating point and 8 integers. Of the 30 trillion, 20 of it is in the GPU and 10 of it is in the specialized processor. A special processor like a TPU. Does that mean we're new ways of designing deep learning AI? You can see that we chose 2010 for a specific reason. There are some networks that we know are going to be relatively well known, therefore it can be simplified its design even further. DLA is about, at the core level, 33% more energy efficient than CUDA. If I design something that's very limiting, very specialized, and I can get another third energy at the core level, at the chip level, when you add the overhead and IOs, call that maybe another third. You don't get the third. But the benefit is you know what you want to run, like CNNs and that type of thing. Unfortunately, there are so many different types of networks. There are CNN, RNNs, networks where you don't reduce the precision from 32-bit floats. I want the flexibility that goes along with those different networks. I want that to run on CUDA. I think the thing is, we believe deep learning can have a benefit of both. The incremental saving is likely to be less and less because tensor cores are becoming so much more efficient. But nonetheless, there's some benefit to be had there, and they are much better than CPUs. Once again, if you need a simplified version of that, what he's saying is that there's a reason that they're going with this approach. Essentially, they believe that the majority of instructions are going to be more general, but what they do want to do is to also ensure that they're able to reduce power consumption by utilizing these new tensor cores and this new design. Therefore, you essentially get the best of both worlds. You increase performance more and not increase energy proportionally. Finally, I'm going to discuss this specific piece of news. The reason I'm going to discuss this is because some people were reporting on it. I didn't, not for any reason other than I just didn't get around to it, to be honest with you, to even reading it. But related to security concerns, Spectre and GPUs. And Huang said that there was this morning, some news was incorrectly reported. I forget exactly what the headline was, but it is incorrect. Our GPUs are immune, not affected by security. We did release a driver update that patched CPU vulnerability. We're patching the CPU vulnerability the same way Amazon's going to, the same way SAP is going to, because we had the software as well. It's nothing to do with the GPU, but our driver is software. Anyone who has software needs to do the patching. And so he was once again asked to double down. Are you sure that your GPU is not affected? And Huang said, I'm absolutely certain the GPU does not need to be patched. This is exactly the same as AMD with the Radeon GPUs. Of course, they don't do speculative execution, because I don't do speculative execution, because the architecture is fundamentally different from a CPU. AMD, Nvidia's graphics cards are absolutely fine. They are not going to be affected. And in the case of Nvidia, the reason we saw this patch, very simple. The GeForce driver, I'm going to shock you here, it's not hardware, is it? No, that's right, it's of course software. So they needed to patch that to be sure that their software stack wasn't vulnerable, not the GPU stack. With all of that said, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Yes, it's been a bit of an higgledy-piggledy video. A couple of last things before I go. There will be me on camera a little bit next week, but I'm going to be buggering off to Norway on Sunday. That, if you're watching this in like 6 months' time, that would be the 21st of January 2018. I'm going to be buggering off for about 4 or 5 days, so I'll be back on like the Thursday. Realistically, I'll be half unconscious for a couple of hours at least. More realistically, I won't be making anything until the Friday, but video production will start again for me on the Friday. I've finished a couple of reviews already, so there will be content from me. It's just going to be like not live stuff though, not like news or anything like that. The week after that, I will be doing camera work much more. I will be on camera considerably more. I am still working on the format. If anyone has any ideas of what they want to tweak, do email me directly, or suggestions, do email me directly at paul@redgamingtech.com. And that's about it, actually. So with all of that said, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.